I know folks are still joining. This is Ron Ottinger, and we want to welcome you to the STEM Funders Network webinar on the STEM Learning Ecosystem Initiative. I'll be moderating the call today. I know many of you. I'm the Executive Director of the Noyce Foundation, and along with Gerald Solomon, who also knows many of you, the Executive Director of the Samueli, serve as co-chairs of the STEM Funders Network. Let me take just a few minutes to share the process and protocols for today. You know how it will unfold. We have folks from all over the country on the call, which is great. We want to make sure we're respectful of everyone's time, to make sure that you can all hear the presentation, and to make sure that we get everyone's questions addressed on the call. The format we will follow, that we've allotted 90 minutes for the call. It may take less time to get everyone's questions answered, but we have the full 90 minutes if we need it. As you can tell, we are already having some technology issues here with some noise on the line, which we will try to handle, but please bear with us. When Gerald starts talking, everyone's line will be muted other than his to minimize the background noise. When it comes time to ask questions, we ask that you do as follows. You'll see on the right-hand side a list of possible commands, and in the chat section at the bottom, you can indicate your interest in speaking, and Angie Casting, who's in Cleveland, monitoring the question and answer for us, will unmute your line so you can ask the question and keep everyone else's line muted to minimize noise and interruption. I'll repeat that again when we get to the Q&A portion. We really appreciate you all and your interest in the STEM ecosystem initiative. We want to make sure we're responsive to folks as you go through the application process, which is why we've scheduled 2 calls and of course are available by phone as well. So let me now turn this over to Gerald Solomon and Jan Morrison, who's the President and CEO of TIES, to start our presentation on the request for qualifications. Gerald?
Great, thank you, Ron. Appreciate very much the opportunity to be able to do this presentation. There's still some background noise, and technology is what it is. We ask everyone to please go ahead and manually mute your phone. I know there are a couple of people who still have audio on their phone. If you please take time and mute, that would be very helpful so everyone can hear the call as we all have an opportunity to speak. And Angie, to the extent that you need to intercede once in a while and help on that matter, please do so, because there are a couple of people who have not muted their phone, and you want to be able to manage that. Okay? Right. Well, thank you again, everyone, and I'm going to go ahead and start with Jan and do the presentation on the call. So just bear with me for a second. There we go. To go over what the agenda will be for today, Jan and I are going to talk about why the request for qualification has been disseminated. We'll talk about the intended nature of the initiative. We'll talk about the elements necessary for the application and the process itself. And then, as Ron alluded to, we're going to talk about some Q&A to try to answer specific questions that people have. So let's kind of dive right into this if we can. So first of all, who are we? The National STEM Funders is a group of individuals and funders who are deeply invested in STEM education, where we as funders can learn from another, leverage our collective resources, and collaborate on high-impact projects. We're really about how we can have all U.S. students have an equal opportunity to engage in really true high-quality STEM learning experiences that enhance their ability to succeed both in STEM and outside of STEM. And these are the funders who have been and are members of the STEM Funders Network, whose primary or one of primary roles of funding is around STEM education. So, you know, there's an underlying premise that we like to talk about that I think all of us can agree on, and that's the fact that learning today is really 24/7. It's as much in school as it is out of school. And if you recognize that and believe in that premise, then you really have to figure out how do you intersect all of the learning platforms and opportunities that exist in order to enhance the capacity of each student to evolve and grow. So as you think about that, think about what has been done through the national academies and other studies to study and examine what it means to learn. And what you have here is a slide that basically talks about the investment that's been made for really a couple of decades around education and STEM learning, with some really key milestones, one being the framework for the K-12 science education report that was done by the National Academy, and then funding for the project known as iSTEM or STEM integration, the STEM is Everywhere program, and the cross-cutting collaborative report that was done this past year. And all of that has been done in coherence with and concurrent with the development of the next-gen science standards. And out of those studies and reports that were done by the National Academy came the concept of what is now known as the STEM learning ecosystem, which is the idea of how do you combine in-school, after-school, STEM-focused institutions and community and family to create a learning environment where individuals can actually excel and optimize and intersect the opportunities around all of the critical skills we talk about and the attributes of what makes up a true STEM learner in our world. So I'm going to go ahead for a moment and turn it over to Jan Morrison from TIES, and she's going to talk a little bit about what that ecosystem functionally looks like. So Jan, if you could address that, please.
Thanks, Gerald, and I hope everybody can hear me well. Please let Angie know if you can't. This slide is absolutely crucial, and it's a big thank you to our Department of Education partner, Ellen Letman, who actually conceived of what an ecosystem would look like and when things are integrated, how it works and how it works very well. This is an important slide to all of you, the communities that are on with us and are thinking about responding to the RFQ. At the center of the slide, it says it is learner that is top and focused here. If you noticed, it doesn't say student because it is at least students, but it is absolutely the learner throughout 24/7 in the community, including school and out of school, that we're talking about in an ecosystem. And if we start at 1 o'clock on the slide, the institutions of higher education are always involved in schools and in informal institutions, but often in silos. What we're saying here is that four-year higher education institutions, community colleges, certificate programs, all have to be part of what would be a robust integrated learning environment that we call the ecosystem. Necessary, and actually the focus of much of the discussion here, are the out-of-school programs. What is happening in the community, that time when our students and our children are spending when they're not in formal education, and with a wide brush of what it means to be out of school. It is important that the learning that goes on is acknowledged and comes out of the silo of being out of school, but is part of the greater system that we're calling the ecosystem. Important next is the term family. Oftentimes we use the term parents. In our cities and in our communities, it is the parents often that are the center of the family, but not only. And what we felt very strongly was that if you look at the communities and the ecosystems that are robust and are supporting STEM for all students, you find that there's families involved and the broader definition of what a family is. Formal K-12 education, the schools that our children spend the bulk of their days in, and even in their summers in some of the year-round schools. They have to be part of the ecosystem. Often right now, if you look at communities, we wring our hands about how we can make our STEM programs and our STEM learning for our youngsters so much more robust. And we don't necessarily look past the school to the greater ecosystem to make a difference in the way that we engage our children. In the kind of ecosystems we're talking about and that have been described in some of the emerging models, the school is as much part of this work as is the out of school. STEM-rich institutions are our zoos. They're our innovation hubs, our energy centers. It says STEM-rich, not STEM education-rich. This means for us, and it's a challenge for us, to think beyond the border of education into STEM and how STEM is part of our communities in developing workforce, in developing economic opportunities for our students and for the future. And that is part of a robust ecosystem. And finally, and not last or least, are the business community. These are the beneficiaries of an ecosystem that is robust, smart, and supports learning in STEM at all times and in 24/7. They have, in the ecosystems that are emerging and as models, we find that the business community does more than write checks, does more than doing shadow days, but has schools on their campuses and involves their engineers 24/7 in projects that students are doing. They take a very close and important role in education so that the learner-centric, the learner who's centric to all of the ecosystem is touched by all of these communities together. This slide is really central to your vision of how you begin to respond to the RFQ. Gerald, Gerald's going to go on and talk about the possibilities.
Thank you, Jan. So look at it a different way through the proverbial Venn diagram where you see the intersections between out of school and in school, or informal after school and formal ed. And think about the ways in which a true seamless experience on education and learning could look like in an ecosystem, where instead of just having pre-service teachers doing their pre-service work in a formal ed system, why not do it in a Boys and Girls Club, or a 4-H program, or in an after-school program, or in a library or a science center? Look at non-traditional opportunities. Look at ways in which project-based and inquiry-based experiential learning could be integrated between formal in-school and out-of-school learning. And when you talk about Common Core and NGSS, think about ways in which the strands that are talked about can be integrated across learning platforms. Those are the types of seamless activities when you talk about a STEM learning system that we as STEM funders are trying to move forward in the work that we're talking about. So let's dive into the RFQ itself and the information that's here. So when you talk about the RFQ, what we're really talking about is the design and development of a critical architecture for really integrating learning across in and out of school platforms. It's really the idea of featuring dynamic collaborations. It's the idea of communities working collectively to understand challenges, gaps, goals, and connectivities that could arise. And it's also about providing for cross-collaborative professional learning and development. We would encourage everyone to go to our website at www.stemecosystems, and that's plural.org. And that's the home page that you see before you. If you were to click on Learn More, that would take you directly into all of the components that we're talking about, where you can go ahead and see all the strategies. You can get into the RFQ. You can do all the things that you need to do in order to navigate the system to understand the RFQ and to respond to it. Just a word of process here for a moment. There's still some background noise for some people. The technology is not fully capable of being able to advance and mute everyone. So if you can, please make sure your lines are muted. So thank you very much. So let's take a minute and talk about the RFQ itself. Both on the website and the homepage of the RFQ, there are certain timeline dates that you need to be aware of. One was the launching of it, two, this webinar, and the second one coming up, the date the application is due, and thanks to the support of the Office of Science, Technology, and Policy in the White House, our first community of practice will be at the White House on November 11 and 12. And for those of you who are applying and interested in participating, please block those dates off because they are solid and set for what we will be doing. And the meeting will be at the White House for those first few days of the first convening. And special thanks to OSTP, to the Corporation for National Community Service, Department of Ed, the NRC and the Teacher Advisory Council, and CGI for all of their support and effort in this process and moving this forward. Between them, the STEM funders, and all of you, we have really put together a robust collaborative around how we can move forward in really making all of this happen and really successful in what we do. In the announcement date, by the way, my apologies, is not October 14, it's October 21. My apologies, that's a typographical error. So let's move to the overview of the project and what the project looks like. This is just a very simple visual of what the RFQ talks about. It's the idea of bringing on an initial 25 sites and a minimum of 10 sites thereafter for the ensuing several years. The idea of providing a robust technical assistance program that Jan will talk about shortly, a robust community of practice of peer-to-peer learning that Jan will also talk about shortly. And those are really the core of what we're trying to create, which is a national movement about how we can change the way communities and systems learn. What's the architecture around that? How do we really embed STEM into everyday life? And the idea of having on-site coaches, technical assistants, peer-to-peer learnings are integral to the work that gets done. There's also the opportunity for an awarding of collaboration grants where needed, and the details around that are discussed in the RFQ. And thanks to the support of CNCS and John Kelly and AmeriCorps Vista, we are looking at ways in which we can actually assign existing or future AmeriCorps Vista people as true facilitators and support for the evolution and maturation and cultivation of these ecosystems as they evolve and grow. And throughout this entire process, we're looking at how do we evaluate where and how we are making a difference, looking at the concepts of ethnography, looking at cultural anthropologist perspectives, looking at programmatic perspectives, so that what we bring is both the social and program review of what's working, what's not, how do we learn from it, and how do we continue to evolve and grow to make sure that the work that we are all doing has the kind of impact that we want to be able to have. So at this point, what I'd like to do is have Jan talk about the benefits of participation and specifically the communities of practice and the technical assistance pieces. So Jan, please go ahead.
Thanks, Gerald, and thank you all again for your participation here. I want to start, and I know many of you, I've spoken to probably 2/3 of you who are on the phone with us on this webinar, and you asked me probably as one of the first questions, what are the benefits of participation? Let me first back up and say that as you received the email from the STEM Funders Network inviting you to the process, there were names on that email that were top on the subject, and there were copies to that. This was so there was a way to bring all of this to your community. That invitation was for your community to participate, not necessarily for you specifically as an institution or an individual to take the heavy lift of responding for your community unilaterally. It is an invitation through you to the greater community that you touch and beyond. So that's very important, because the benefits of participation are for the whole community, whether you're a city, whether you decide on a region, regardless of where the geographic is and the boundary of what you term a community. It's quite important for that. So we're not creating here a hub and spoke kind of ecosystem. Ecosystems are mesh networks. Everybody has that equal touch and that equal ability to benefit from the participation. We are excited about, as Gerald had mentioned, the invitation to, as a single community of practice, to come together in November on the 11th and 12th in Washington, D.C., to be at the White House together, to begin that work that we're going to do as a single community of practice. We are going to have STEM-focused professional learning opportunities through a peer-to-peer learning network. That's that mesh concept rather than a hub and spoke concept. We are talking about cross-collaboration systems that are focused on knowledge as well as research. We're very interested in supporting the Common Core, in NGSS being capable of being implemented as a result of the community of practice, of assessments, and of the ecosystem developing itself. We're equally feel is important in the communities of practice is that we all learn the process of design, that in order to bring about change, that it doesn't come in a random way, but it comes in a very deliberate process that we all learn together. We intend to have monthly communities of practice, calls, webinars similar to this, that we will host, but also that we are expecting that the communities will host as they learn and become very excited about the work that they're doing. And as Gerald mentioned and showed you, there's access to the website for online communication and information sharing. And as part of our communities of practice meetings this coming year, in year one, we are going to have, we're offering for each of the ecosystems that are selected that 2 ecosystem members per site would be able to attend. That is with support, and up to 4 without support. And we can get into that a little bit more either online here on the webinar, or we will handle that and help you to understand that further. The technical assistance is longitudinal. It is not episodic. We have a technical assistance team that is created of many experts in the area of STEM, in ecosystem design, and in the work that you're going to be doing in creating partnerships and working in the informal STEM community and in the formal. These folks will be assigned to your communities as TA coaches, and they will be the primary contact. There will be, the coach will then be in charge of helping to design and implement the plan for the ecosystem. And this is important. This is not something that we have preconceived of. We have done a lot of research. We've asked the national academies to do a lot of research with us and for us to know best. And hence the list of attributes and the common strategies. But it's important that all of the communities themselves make all of this work specifically for the community and not a plug and play. Each TA coach will have at least monthly contact, and we know that early on in this it will be more than just monthly. And as well, we are going to assist in the creation of peer-to-peer mentorships. Example for everybody is as Tulsa becomes more and more robust, it might be helping Baltimore to be the kind of community that it wants to be. So while the STEM Funders Network and the Ecosystem TA team will be there and will be helpful, where our expectation is, as a sustainability plan, is that the communities, as they develop their ecosystems and mature the ones that are existing, that they will become invaluable to each other. So Gerald, why don't we go on to common questions and issues?
Great, Jan, thanks. And so let's talk about some of the questions that have arisen since we let the RFQ out on the street, as they would say. So when we talk about who can apply, that's been a common question, and I would ask people to go ahead and look at the RFQ at page 9, and it will talk about the types of organization and the applicant criteria. When you talk about who is eligible, again, go to the same page in the section called Applicant Criteria Type of Organization, and it specifically talks about who can apply and that we are looking for only one application per community. So the question then arises, as some have asked, why did you send out the RFQ to several people in the community? And that was done purposefully because we know of many people and organizations and entities in a given community that are deeply invested in and interested in STEM at a potential ecosystem. And the purpose was to inform all of the parties of the RFQ and to facilitate them working together to communicate with each other towards the creation and development of a single application. That's really important so that people understand. I'm sure the question will arise again. The idea is one application per community and all the people working together, as you see from the slides around what the ecosystem looks like, to work towards the development of that single application. The community definition, again, is within the RFQ. It's on the slide here, but again, look at pages 8 and 9 under the section heading Expectations of Selected Sites, and you'll be able to read on that. You can also, again, go to the website. All of this information is well defined and very visible within the website in multiple places. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions as we conclude in a minute the presentation, but we wanted to get the ones that were more common to us over the last week or two right up in front in hopes that that will answer some of those. So let's talk a little bit about the reviews and the objectives here relating to the criteria and the selection criteria. And again, please everyone, if you can, mute your lines and do not enable your video so that we can maintain a continuity of information to all of those who are listening and on the webinar itself. So what we're looking at is the basic core attributes and characteristics and strategies. This is what might be considered an optimal, very mature, existing type of ecosystem. What we want to be able to do is ask, as you do your application, where do you fit within these kinds of strategies and attributes? The toolkit that Kathleen Traphagen and Saskia Trail developed, that's deeply embedded in multiple locations within the website, can help you navigate through these topics. But really what we're looking at are, where are you? We want to know where you are so that we know what type of coach you may need, what type of support you may need within the community of practice. We want to very much customize and tailor the work that we're talking about to each ecosystem, and especially as we pair up ecosystems over time, how one can work with and inform another and be a real collaborative partner. So when you look at attributes, the kinds of things we talk about are, who's your passion leader? Who's taking charge? Who's facilitating? Who's moving the process forward? Do you have funding in order to make this happen? In some cases it's in kind, in some cases it's someone who's actually writing a check. Who are the partners within the process? Do you have an after-school partner, an informal learning partner, a public ed partner who values and appreciates and respects all of the various partnerships that are part of the ecosystem? And a question we always ask people to think about is the enlightened self-interest piece. That is, what's in it for me? People collaborate because of, one, the altruistic reason, and two, because they see personal value in doing so. And that conversation always needs to be front and center in the work that occurs in what happens. And that's a conversation we think that too often gets misplaced or doesn't occur at the level it needs to be. So when you look at your own attributes, think about these. You don't have to have all of these at the robust level we talk about, but we need you to be able to talk about where you are within this framework so we know how to best address the technical assistance work to support the evolution and maturation and cultivation of your ecosystem. And then think about the common strategies, the things that most ecosystems either think about, talk about, have, or aspire to. And it's the idea of building capacity for your education and learning systems, having the tools and instrumentalities to be able to do that, talking about the linkages between the in and out of school platforms, the idea of the learning progressions from early learning all the way up to having a robust workforce that's STEM competent and STEM capable. The idea of the focus on inquiry and project-based learning and the real-world connections. The engagement, as Jan talked about, regarding the family and community and moving everything into that real holistic sense, and then really looking at the ultimate end user, which is the business community and the community at large, and what are those career opportunities, and how are you having the progression from education all the way into workforce and what that might look like. So at this time, what we'd like to do is go ahead and say, you know, we are in a position to now go to questions and answers, and thank you for listening to the presentation. We hope we've provided you some good fundamental information, and I'd like to now turn it back to Ron, who will moderate the question and answer portion of the call.
Great job, Gerald and Jan, and that was so helpful. And we have a great group. It looks like we have over 95 folks listening in. That's really exciting. Again, on the question and answer, just to remind you, if you would go to the bar that has all the information, and down at the very bottom it says chat, and where there's a 2 with a colon, it should either say organizers only or everyone, so we know that you want to ask a question, and we can see who is ready. I have a few that I can jump in on if folks don't have a burning one ready to go. But let's see if we have anyone who wants to start. The question from Michael Bahidas, is the slideshow online yet? How do folks access the slides from today's presentation?
That's a good question, Ron, and thank you for asking. We will post this up onto the website as soon as the conclusion of the webinar. And my apologies to everyone if technology would have it. My screen is now frozen, so you're going to look at this slide until the end of the webinar. My apologies.
There's a question from Joseph Marino. I think I understand it, but how do you establish credentials for learning outside of schools? In other words, I think, what kind of training support is there for the out-of-school time staff, if I understand that correctly? And Joseph, if I didn't get that right, you can jump in.
Jan, you want to field that?
Sure. Joe, I'm not 100% sure what you're after. I think when we're talking about the out-of-school environment, there are a lot of formal evaluations and assessment instruments and tools that our informal partners throughout our communities use in order to demonstrate that they have the capacity and that they are doing robust work in STEM with their youngsters, no matter what age group that is. These are good questions to be asked, and certainly this is something that you would want to do. Let me also mention that one of the partners that has been very supportive of this, as the STEM funders have developed the ecosystem initiative, has been the Pear Center at Harvard. And that is also a website that you could look at, and we'll provide that link if it isn't already there in the resource section, which I think it might be. But that, Joe, that's another way of looking and seeing where those, how to understand credentialing and certification in that environment.
And I would also say, Jan, this is Ron talking, that if you go to click the number 2, Science PD, many of the larger after-school providers are using that as an online, just-in-time professional development site. It also has a click-through to a course that many of the frontline staff are taking, and they get a certificate at the end. So the whole push right now in this national field-building effort with the youth development organizations like 4-H, YMCA, Girl Scouts, Boys and Girls Clubs, etc., as well as with major national efforts like the Mont State After School Networks and Every Hour Counts, is to really increase the quality of the providers and facilitators. Thank you. Kirsten Ellenbogen, hi Kirsten, who wears many hats, and asks, for evaluation, are there ways you can help us coordinate across our communities? And the answer is absolutely. We are working on the design of the evaluation now. We'd love to have your input as we go through this, given your expertise with the Center for the Advancement of Informal Science Education and your work at the Great Lakes Science Center and visitor studies and others. So we are now looking at the design. We have a framework for that now. So absolutely, we're talking about looking both at the formal and informal spaces with the instruments and assessments that already exist, as well as looking at what assessments we might need to design in addition. Thanks for the question. Let's see, another question from Joseph. Marina, how do you know whether a student has learned something and integrate, in the out of school time space, and how does that get integrated back into the K-12 day? How does the teacher know what was learned?
Yeah, so I'll start at that, Ron. This is Gerald, and you can add on, and Jan as well. There are a number of tools that the STEM Funders Network have invested in. One in particular, for example, is called Dimensions of Success, or the DOS tool developed out of Harvard, that has a full-fledged assessment and evaluation piece to respond to exactly what the questionnaire has asked. Part of what we're doing in this ecosystem and the evaluation of it is exactly what you referenced, which is how do we transfer that or know that that information and sharing and knowledge, in fact, influences and affects the in-learning opportunity as well as the out-of-school learning opportunity. That's why the ecosystem is so important, because currently everything is siloed and there are no communications or opportunities to be able to, let alone evaluate, even know that that exists. So what you're referencing is one of the core reasons why the STEM learning ecosystem is so critically important if we really want to understand the 24/7 learning experience and provide for those kind of cross-collaborative learning opportunities.
I'm just looking through all the questions, because if we go one by one, we won't get there. But there are a number of questions where folks don't know who else in their community may have received an invitation to apply, and how do they find out who else in their community may have received an invitation.
That's a good question, Ron. Sure. So on the website itself, there is a component, a subpage, that talks about who is invited and who has indicated an intent to apply. If you go to that part of the website, you will be able to identify people in your community. It's sometimes a little lacking as far as time is concerned, but we're trying to update that on a daily basis. And then also to Ron's comment, we know there are more questions than there might be time to address. We will be posting up the questions on the frequently asked page of the website in the next few days, and we will answer everyone's question, and it will be put up online, and we will also have the second webinar as well, as we have mentioned at the onset of the call.
Great. There's a question about if you only address 5 of the 7 priorities, will the proposal still be competitive?
Absolutely. What we're trying to do, we don't expect anyone to have a robust ecosystem in place. That's part of what we've seen through the work that Kathleen and Sofsky have done in their environmental scanning. Everyone's at different stages. The goal is to help everyone optimize what can be best for their given community. In some communities, for example, we have interest from communities that are very, very rural that may not have some of the same components that a more urbanized community may have. So we are being very cognizant of that in the review process and trying to make sure that we have real diversity in the cohort that's part of the first 25, and then for the ensuing ecosystems and communities that become part of this. Ron, if I can address one question that I've seen here, if you don't mind.
Yep.
And that is how people can be invited to participate. Well, one, you can actually go ahead and email per the website at info@stemecosystems.org. And you can also go ahead and apply by clicking the apply button and move forward. We prefer, however, that you go through, because we want to manage the information and who's doing what. We would like you to please, it's password protected. My fault, I've just been educated. Sorry. You need to go to info@stemecosystems.org, and through that communication, you will get the password to be able to enter the application and apply. My apologies. Right. Thank you for the clarification.
Gerald, this is Jan. Let me add one piece to that. When you do that, should you decide that you would like to apply and you have not been invited, then it would at that point my team will get in touch with you, and we'll chat about all the and give you an opportunity to talk a little bit and avail yourself of some of the conversation that has happened already with some of the other communities who have been invited. So we will respond to you immediately.
There are a few questions around, if I'm new to this, how do I find out more about the common strategies to get started? And the website that Gerald referred to, www.stemecosystems.org, is a guide for the 4 major strategies and common approaches and attributes to launching and establishing a quality STEM ecosystem. So the website, which has multiple resources, would be a great place to start. There's a question about money to Gerald and probably and Janet from Catherine Cavagna, and I'm sure others do too. Is the 2-to-1 match expected to be cash, in kind, or a combination?
So it really is going to depend upon the community's needs and its capacity. Cash is always helpful, but in-kind is equally as a value depending upon the dynamics and composition of the community. So we are open to whatever that might look like, but it's got to be pretty detailed if it's going to be in-kind.
Right. And especially if you're a new community, the resources will be needed to pay for design and other workshops and technical assistance. So rather than wait with questions, it would be best if we are available through that info email that Gerald mentioned to answer any of your questions. We want to be as responsive as we can be through this process. Again, Gerald, there are more questions about if if you haven't received an invitation, is there still if your community is interested and has the capacity, how to find out who other partners are and how to jump in?
Sure, and that's going to be a repetitive question, we know, often. The ability to go ahead and apply is by contacting info@stemecosystems.org, and you will get the information on how to apply and the password to be able to do so. Let me take this question and kind of move it tangentially a little, Ron, because I think it's on some people's minds, and that is, what if we apply and we are not selected in the first cohort of 25 communities? And please understand that this is a longitudinal process. The STEM Funders Network is invested deeply over a long period of time to really make a systemic change around how people engage and learn. And what we want to be able to do is, for those that may not be in the first cohort of 25, we are setting up a process and procedure to be able to help guide you as a community to be able to then apply in the next year or the year after or the year after that. This is truly about a national movement around learning in STEM education. And the concept is that we will help people at all stages, but the deep, deep work around technical assistance and communities of practice at the onset will be on the first cohort of 25, but don't be concerned too much if you aren't chosen. You'll still be given some opportunity to learn and engage and cultivate your local ecosystem in preparation for reapplication in an ensuing year.
Great. Gerald, and Jan, there's a great question from Judith, it looks like Hallinan, that the timeline talks about a 3-year plan for the network, but obviously building a robust ecosystem takes longer than 3 years. Is it important in the RFQ to address sustainability and how past the 3 years the ecosystem would be sustained?
Jan?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. And hi, Judy. Glad you're on with us. In engineering any ecosystem and any project that is that talks to the establishment of architecture, we talk about it being three years. That is the bottom baseline to your question. Actually, in the way your question is leading here, it is at least 3 years. In your thinking and deliberation about how this is sustained, following the attributes and the common strategies is critical, but they are at least. You know your community well. You know the kind of planning that has to be done on a longitudinal basis in order to sustain it. So we figured 3 years because that's absolutely the bare minimum in which it's going to take, and that's our understanding from other communities. But additionally, to be mature, to be sustaining, and to be pervasive throughout as an ecosystem for the community, it's going to take more time. Again, in responding to the RFQ, it's at least 3 years. We want to at least see that. If you take the time to advance that plan beyond, we'd love to see that as well.
There's a question from Donna DiCiato. Can folks submit information beyond what's on the RFQ, if there's a video, a DVD, or other demonstrations of the ecosystem, partnership agreements, etc.? Can additional information be submitted with RFQ?
So that's a question, honestly, that we did not address at the development of the website because it's an online application. Currently, it does not have the capacity to handle video or other types of attachments. So you have to limit it to what's there. What I would suggest you do is, if you have things you want us to be able to see, is reference that in the application process, because they are fill-in fields. And as we review these and there's a contact person who has to be identified in your application, we will make every effort to ensure that we see the full component of what is being offered and provided by each community.
Right. Still more questions, and I'll answer it. We only want one proposal per community. So if you don't know who the other partners are in your community who may be applying, we likely do know. So please submit your question to the info email that Gerald mentioned. Gerald and Jan, what are the, if I'm a more mature ecosystem, you know, what are the benefits for me participating, for my community participating?
So Jan, why don't you start and then I'll backfill.
Absolutely. If you're a more mature ecosystem, remember all of this is mass customization. You will still be thinking about growth and scale. You'll be thinking about what your trajectory is over the next few years. So while you're not starting at zero, you have growth on your mind, no doubt. We want to be a part of that. We want to help. We want to learn. And we want to provide the kind of technical assistance that it is going to be robust and important for you. And that was the comment that Gerald made earlier about it not being one size fits all, and that we care that the ecosystems respond to the constraints and to the challenges that are part of the community itself as you define that.
Great. Just financially, what is covered and not covered in what the STEM Funders Network is offering?
So my suggestion is you read the RFQ in detail. In summary, what we're doing is we are covering all of the technical assistance and coaching that's being assigned to and will be utilized by your community throughout the process. We are covering the costs attendant to all communities going to the communities of practice, which will occur at least twice a year. The first one is November 11 and 12 at the White House. We will be paying for airfare, hotel, rooms, food, and the like for attendance for 2 people from each community. Should a community wish to add up to 2 more, the 2 additional people would be at the cost of the local ecosystem. And for those communities that are selected for the $10,000 grant component, that's self-explanatory. And then lastly, for the AmeriCorps Vista piece, thanks to the generosity of John Kelly and the AmeriCorps Vista people, as that evolves and grows, they are willing to match up to 50% of the cost of the AmeriCorps Vista person that would be assigned to your community. So you've got a financial component that supports the development, but the key piece is the deep, deep learning and engineering design around the cultivation and maturity of the connectivity and cross-collaborative learnings between in and out of school in this entire new learning platform concept.
Great. I'm not sure I'm seeing questions that we haven't addressed. If we haven't addressed your question, if you could write back in again. But it looks to me, Gerald and Jan, that as though we have answered most of the questions. There is one about when this recording will be available.
Yeah, it'll be available again shortly after. Give us a couple of days to post it up. The website will have, again, people's questions, people's answers. We want to be as informative as we can, as transparent as we can, and share as much information as we can as well. There is a question that's been asked, I think, Ron, that I can address, and that is by a couple do we expect everyone to advance all of the strategies and all of the attributes? And the answer is no. In the ideal situation in some communities, they have the capacity to be able to do so, but not in every one. And that's why what we're trying to do is really customize and tailor the technical assistance and the coaching in a way that allows you to optimize the cross-collaborative learning experiences that can exist in your community. So, for example, as I alluded to earlier, there's a rural community I know of that is very interested in participating. They have no science center, they have no higher education institution, but they have a robust 4-H program, and they have an in-school community and an after-school program that's interested of wanting to really build out STEM learning opportunities for both the learner as a student and as a professional. So we encourage them to engage and apply as well. Again, we are looking at ways to be able to enhance the opportunity around STEM learning and to help develop the architecture in a way that's customized and best suited to your community's needs.
Gerald and Ron, if I could jump in for a moment, there was a question about the July 15th webinar and what will the content be. We will not do a presentation on July 15th. We will remind everybody of the attributes and the common strategies because of the importance of this, and because they are guiding points to completing the RFQ. We will take questions for the bulk of the time with you all, and those will come not only from the moment that we ask you for them, but also from the information from the website, and also our conversations as the technical assistance team. As we hear your conversations, hear your questions, we will bring them to the group as well if they are consistently coming up, or if we find that there are important learning that's happened over the 2 weeks as you begin to actually respond to the RFQ.
Yeah, and that reminds me, Jan, let me add to the people on the call that there have been some communities that have said, we'd like to apply, and we've got a disparate group of people, but we're really not sure how to put this together to apply. One of the opportunities that Ron and Jan and I and a few others are able to provide to you is if you email, again, at info@stemecosystems.org, we will be glad to set up a private webinar for you and your community stakeholders for maybe 35, 40 minutes, up to an hour, to actually engage your key stakeholders around that specific conversation. We have done this multiple times already with communities that are both rural and urban. We've done it face-to-face. We've done it through webinars. So if you are at the point where you want to do this and you need some push to make that happen, and you need to rally the stakeholders, and you need to be able to make that occur with some help, please email info@stemecosystems.org and make that request, and we will try to coordinate an offline webinar for you and your community to help guide you through this process.
There's a question, Gerald, about the budget worksheet. Should it include the expenditure of the $10,000 request and the expenditure of the matching funds, or the the two?
Yes, and the budget template has been developed that does ask for that in detail. And again, work through the RFQ. If you have questions as you're working through it, that's what the next webinar is about, and that's what info@stemecosystems.org is a place where you can make those inquiries and get responses back.
Is there a maximum number of partners who should fill out the self-assessment or provide letters of support, maybe a minimum and a maximum?
Yes, if you were to read through the RFQ, it requires a minimum of 4 partners. Again, look through the website, read through the RFQ. There's a self-assessment requirement that at least 4 of the partners participate in that and it's at pages 13 and 14 of the RFQ itself.
Is there a maximum?
There is not a maximum.
It is set up for 10 online.
Okay,
yeah, so I guess so there is a maximum, I guess, of 10.
So we can increase.
But if you have more, I guess there's a way for us to figure that out. But there's a minimum of 4 and a maximum currently of 10.
What if I apply and I'm not accepted? Can I still participate in the community of practice, or what are my options for staying connected?
Good question. That was asked before, and I tried to answer it. I'll do that again. And that is that there are many who will not become part of the first cohort, but will and potentially be part of the second and third and fourth, et cetera, as this continues longitudinally. We have carved out space within our budget and the funding from the STEM Funders Network to help cultivate and develop those that are not chosen, to be able to work through the process so that as they reapply in the second year and the third year, et cetera, they can be part of the community of practice and part of the technical assistance.
Okay.
So there are ways in which the initiative will provide some assistance and some support to the non-selected entities.
Okay. Are there any limits on the indirect cost rate? That's a pretty technical question.
So I'm not sure I understand that, because we're not asking for an indirect rate, Ron, so I don't know what that means.
Right.
Yeah, I think that is true.
Offline, to have that question done offline, I think one-on-one would be best.
Okay.
Yeah, because the application is for the, potentially if you're a new community, for the $10,000 support. I guess the question is, if I'm the fiscal agent applying, can I ask for an indirect? $10,000.
So I guess we have not discussed that. My initial inclination would be we would like as much of the funding as possible to go into the program. So the fiscal sponsor, we would ask that they minimize or do that as an in-kind piece. There is a component that says it is maxed at 10% within the template, but we would ask the fiscal sponsors to be supportive of the project as best they can in the process.
Great. I'm not sure if I understand this correctly, but the last question here, the lead partners should be the same ones doing the self-assessment. The lead partners obviously need to do the self-assessment as well, but I assume it's one application, so whoever the lead is should be...
Right, there's one application and one lead, but there's a requirement of a minimum of 4 self-assessments.
Right.
And that was asked previously. There's a minimum of 4, a maximum of 10 opportunities.
I think the question
to participate.
Is it okay if the partners submit their own self-assessment, or should the lead partners be doing that?
I think it's your choice. I think it's the choice of each community, Ron.
Yeah.
Can I chime in here for a sec? I would hope that if you're a lead, that you'd be as interested in the self-assessment of those around you who are doing their work. And so whether it's submitted individually or not, it really is the responsibility, I think, of those who are handling the challenge here in order to understand, because the response is predicated on a full understanding of your community, where it is at the moment.
Right. And to Josh's same question, yes, the letters of support are different from the self-assessment. There's a question of, is there a possibility that larger implementation grants may be available after the first year or so to help with the scale-up of successful models?
That's a good question. We have talked about that within the STEM Funders Network, and it's a matter of resources. And we're hoping to do that, but we don't have a firm commitment at this time, so we purposely did not raise an expectation that may or may not be realized.
Right.
And let me add, this is Jan, let me add as well, it's really important to the sustainability of the ecosystem for the next decade that funds be predominantly focused on local and regional, so that the funders come to understand the value proposition of all your effort and of the results of this as you become a robust and maturing ecosystem. If you're dependent upon outside funding from national sources and from sources in which are competitive, then you are going to always be relegated to from hand to mouth. And if you look at the reports on STEM Learning is Everywhere and what's on the website, you're going to find that the communities that have done the best in sustaining and growth and ensuring growth are the ones that are great partners with their local funders.
Great. I'm not seeing additional questions coming in at the moment, so I think we may have exhausted at least this first round. From our organizer, from our group on the phone, Gerald, Jan, Michelle, Angie, Kathleen, are there any questions you think we've missed?
I can answer.
And again, please feel free, if you have subsequent questions that have not been answered, to email info@stemecosystems.org. We will be posting up questions and answers on the website as they come in, including also posting up communities that intend to apply, people that we've sent invitations to, etc., so as to make this as simple as possible. We have literally over 100 communities that have expressed interest. So this is a very robust project and initiative, and we are doing our very best to make sure that we are both transparent and informative in real time as possible in sharing information.
So there's a last question here that Bernita's reminded me because I missed it before, which is a good question. They're a large housing authority with lots of resident children that they serve, but they don't offer educational services. Will invited applicants be reaching out to these kinds of organizations within their boundaries to identify populations to be served who, in particular, who may not have been served in the past?
So I guess the best answer that I could provide, or we could provide, Ron, is that the ecosystem is comprised of all types of partners and stakeholders and collaborators. If you look at the slide that Jan spent time talking about, community and family, business, in and out of school, all the various pieces that make up the ecosystem, clearly housing and the community around housing is a piece of what is that living ecosystem that exists in a community. Part of what needs to happen is for you to have the conversation with all of the stakeholders around your community interested in this, look at the characteristics and attributes, look at what the RFQ talks for around strategies and design principles, and make the internal decision as to whether you think you meet those criteria in order to be able to apply on behalf of the community with the right partners.
Great, Gerald. I think that's it for today. I think we have addressed all the questions that we've gotten for today, and appreciate everyone's participation on the webinar, and as we all say, the tremendous interest in this pioneering initiative. So thanks to everyone, to Gerald, Jan, Michelle, Angie, Kathleen, who helped organize the webinar, and we'll be back on July 15th.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a terrific day.
Thank you. Thanks, Ron.
Great.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Jan. Bye-bye.